the Financial Survival Network. Now more than ever.
And welcome. You are listening to Watching the Financial Survival Network. Well, are we in deflation now? Gold getting slammed, cars, houses, maybe they're topping. Here with us to figure this situation out is our good friend from dollarcollapse.com, John Rubino. So, John, gold, silver, absolutely getting decimated, and everything else getting decimated worse, right?
Hey, Kerry. Yeah, last time you and I talked, we were in an inflationary economy, and now it looks like it's completely flipped on its head. There's a lot of stuff tanking right now, and chief among them is oil. Obviously, it's gone from $130 a barrel US to like what, 95 or 97 today. So that's a pretty big drop, and it doesn't look like there's any immediate end to it, because it looks like the economy is slowing down. People are buying less stuff largely because they can't afford the kinds of things they've been borrowing or buying, because prices are so way up. So if you can't put gas in your car, and you can't buy the groceries you used to buy, and you can't afford your rent, you have to cut back on things, and that's what people are doing. So the economy is slowing down. We're possibly in a recession already. The Atlanta Fed GDP tracker, which is kind of a real-time measure of economic growth, was negative in the previous quarter, and it looks like it's negative for the quarter that ended in June, and that's technically a recession. So we were in an inflationary boom, and now we're contracting, and there's no real obvious end in sight, because so many things are going down in price, and so many measures of economic growth are contracting. So that was quick. Yeah.
1 minute, the purchasing power of the dollar is tanking, and the next minute, the purchasing power of the dollar is skyrocketing, relative to the other currencies.
And that's a big part of the story right now, because what it implies, see, we're not doing well here. We've got, we had 7 or 8% inflation officially in the last year, and now we're tipping over into recession. There's no reason to think that the dollar is a healthy currency, but it's going up, not in terms of purchasing power. It's still declining in terms of purchasing power, which is the real way you measure a currency, but it's going up relative to the other currencies, especially the euro and the yen, because their countries are in absolute chaos. Europe right now, my God, the European Central Bank found itself forced to tighten because inflation was raging there. But then the yield on Italian and Greek and Portuguese bonds started to go way up relative to the yields on German bonds, which would bankrupt the weaker countries in the Eurozone and lead to a breakup of the euro as a common currency in Europe. So they announced that they were going to tighten by selling German bonds. The ECB did. And meanwhile, they were going to buy the bonds of Italy and the other weaker countries in Europe as a way to keep the relative yields in place, which means they're basically going to keep on easing. They're going to keep on financing the massive deficits of the countries that are least able to handle those deficits. So the Europe is plunging. The Europe is almost at parity with the dollar now, which is a very low price for the euro. Meanwhile, Japan is just a nightmare, because they were the first country that went to MMT, to modern monetary theory, full on, by just having the central bank finance most of the government's debt issuance. And now they're having to ramp it up, because deficits are still soaring, but inflation is rising dramatically, and it's not working. They're not perfectly able to keep the yield on the 10-year bond pegged where they want it, and that's leading everybody to sell the yen. So the yen is crashing, the euro is crashing relative to the dollar, and it's making the dollar look strong. But what it really is the world is in this huge mess right now, and there doesn't seem to be any way out of it, because inflation was not going to fix anything, and the coming recession is also not going to fix anything. The central banks are still in that box that they can't ever get out of. But so the only place it really matters is for investors. We have to figure out how to allocate our money based on what the economy of the world is going to do going forward, and that's suddenly gotten very tricky.
The way I look at it is that Jay Powell is playing a poker game here, and he's got a losing hand. He's got like a pair of deuces. It's just that all the people at the table have worse hands. They've got nothing. And the question is, he's going to have to double down, meaning he's going to have to cut rates while pretending that he's raising them. And there's going to be a tell soon that this is what's going to happen, because no Fed governor, no Fed president wants to be known as the guy who crashed the world economy, right? History will be his judge. You could put up with inflation, even massive inflation, but the idea of crashing the global economy, bankrupting most of the world's countries, no Fed governor wants to be in that position.
Well, see, that's the dilemma they always face when they blow up a bubble and then the bubble starts to burst. They can let a little bit of carnage happen, but not too much, because it could easily just snowball into something that they can't control. And that has become more and more true with each boom and bust cycle, because the booms get bigger and the resulting busts get much more dangerous. And they're in we had the biggest boom of all time. So now we've got the bust that follows that boom, and the Fed is dithering because they don't want to start easing right away while inflation is still at near double-digit levels. But if a lot of industrial commodities start to follow oil down, which some of them are already, and home prices start to drop and car prices start to drop, and the stock market is down, that's the Fed's excuse. Maybe it's messy enough out there for them to stop tightening and start easing again. That would be much earlier than anybody expected, but things are happening fast. So I think there's a very decent chance that by the end of this year, we're going to be back in full-on easing mode, with quantitative easing and lowering interest rates. Maybe we'll have negative interest rates in the coming cycle, assuming that they can salvage what's happening right now. In other words, turn the coming bust into a new boom. And it's possible they can't do that. It's possible this just swamps the monetary authorities of the world. So we'll see. But in the sense that trouble is coming and the Fed may have to start easing again, it's really familiar. It's just like what's happened the last 3 or 4 times around, only on a much bigger scale.
Yeah. Well, Alan Greenspan's thing was, I've mentioned this in other interviews too, was always, hey, when the party is really getting started, that's the time to pull the punch bowl away, not when all the participants are plastered and can't get up out of their seats. So when you look back at Jay Powell, he didn't pull the punch bowl away. He just kept filling it up and filling it up. And to the point where he was putting straight ethyl alcohol in that punch. He wasn't even bothering with any juice or anything else. And you have to wonder, the thing's a mess. There's nothing they could do. It's inevitable, all of this. But if he had started doing a quarter basis point raise a year ago or 18 months ago, every other month, he'd be where he wanted to be now, and he could start cutting at this point. But by deferring it, this is the kid that you just give the bag of M&Ms to, and they polish off that 1 pound bag, and then the next thing you know, they're puking their guts out all over the place and swearing off chocolate till you bring out the next bag, right?
Well, you could make the case that so much of what's going on right now can be immediately traced, not long term, but over the last couple of years, can be traced to how we screwed up the pandemic response. If we, as global society, had adopted the Sweden/Florida approach to not locking down, encouraging people to take sensible measures, but letting the economy stay open, then the Fed wouldn't have had so much pressure on it to ease as aggressively as it did. The Fed balance sheet, which is a measure of how much new currency they dump in the market, went up by like $4 trillion in a couple of years. That's an insane amount of new money to hit the system with. And it's completely understandable that we got a bout of inflation because of it. But now the Fed has to deal with the consequences of that, and it's not clear how they do it. Had they, like you said, been raising rates gradually, a little at a time over the past 3 or 4 or 5 years, then we'd be in much better shape right now. But they've tightened what, 1 percentage point so far is all, and the financial system is imploding. This was the worst 6 months to start a year in the stock market since 1970, and it was even worse for the bond markets. So stocks and bonds both tanked in response to that little tiny bit of tightening from the Fed. So the idea that they're going to do this again and then again over the next 6 months or a year is ludicrous. There's no way they can do that without crashing the market. And there's no way they want to do it. They want to be the guys that are just handing out easy money to everybody and are loved and respected, like Alan. They all want to be the next Alan Greenspan, the maestro, who was the guy who saved the economy and managed it just right. When in reality, he was patient zero for the disease of incredibly easy money leading to a collapse of global civilization, maybe. And so they're in a box, the Fed is, or all the monetary authorities around the world. They're in a box they can't get out of, because whatever they do leads to a disaster. And so they're in a position where they have a choice of disasters, but that's basically it. There's nothing else they can do. So what do we do about that? How are we going to invest for this? It was great to short the market for the first 6 months of the year. And it may be good to do that for the next 6 months. We don't know. And it was, for a stretch there, really good to load up on gold and silver. Now, not so good. Precious metals are getting whacked today as we start to think that maybe we're heading into a recession. So it's not completely clear what you do immediately with your money. But longer term, as all this plays out, it is eminently clear. You want real assets. And you don't want financial assets, because they'll be the things that burn up when everything really flies out of control. But right now, it's a stressful situation for people who are, let's say, gold bugs or stackers or whatever, because they're seeing the value of their holdings go down. That won't last. It'll end as soon as the Fed takes all the tightening thing back and decides to start easing again. But in the meantime, it's painful. But it's also a chance to buy things maybe at a lower price. You can, if you continue to dollar cost average with gold and silver, you're getting more ounces now with those prices down. So you're adding ounces, which is really the measure that you should be looking at. How many ounces do you own? And to the extent that you can get more now, with whatever per month you put into it, this is actually a pretty good time.
Totally. And when you see what they're doing, the machinations, it's truly an emperor has no clothes moment. I just look at it like they need to drive down the price of gold right now as low as they possibly can, even though it's not probably in all likelihood going to last. Because whenever the cure comes in, the cure will invariably be worse than the disease, or like I like to say with the Federal Reserve, the cure is the disease. And so when you whack it down, and I'm not sprouting out conspiracy theories, but the lower you can drive it, then the more leeway the canary in the gold mine gives you to actually retract and pivot. And one other thing, when we look at kleptocurrencies, we start to realize that they were as much a function, their rapid acceleration of absurd monetary growth of MMT, as all the other assets were, John. There was nothing that special about them. Right now, Bitcoin is hovering right around its December 2017 high, which was right under 20,000. So that's support there, but it looks weak. It's broken it a number of times. It could easily go down to 10,000, maybe into mid 4 digits. Not that I think it's finished. I think this is the moment when Bitcoin really does disconnect from the fiat monetary system coming up. That's my belief in it.
Yeah, well, right now cryptos trade like tech stocks. In other words, when people are excited and optimistic and they perceive a future that's going to be much better than the present, they buy things like Apple and Google and Facebook and Bitcoin and Ethereum. Because those are the things that will get more valuable in the techno utopia that we hope we'll be living in 5 years from now. And when we get worried and think that we're heading for some gigantic global crash where we're back in the 1930s, you don't want to hold those risk on kinds of assets. And so they all get sold down together. And Bitcoin and Ethereum are down quite a bit more than most of the big tech stocks, but they're all down. And that's just basically how they trade. Now, like you said, someday they'll decouple. And maybe Bitcoin becomes a form of money that is stable and preserves capital. And that hasn't happened yet, but that could happen. So it would be nice to be able to time the bottom in something like this, something that goes up as much as cryptos do from their bottoms. If you can time the bottom, you make 1,000% or whatever on whatever you put into it at the bottom. It's hard to time, so
Yeah.
I wouldn't presume to
Hard
tell
to-
anybody what to do with
Yes.
cryptos right now. Yeah,
No
but
question. It's this is a really tough time period for investors, and this is a case where return of capital is way more important than return of capital, right?
yes. Well, Kerry, do we have time to talk about food riots and things like that? I don't
Yeah,
know how
yeah,
much time we have left.
absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah,
because
what's going on in the Netherlands? Nice, peaceful, mellow people. They just want to smoke their hashish and be left alone, and they're going nuts now.
well, and that seems like a pretty big story, what's going on over there. But I was talking to a friend this morning and I mentioned the Dutch farmers, and she had never heard of them. And she primarily watches CNN and MSNBC. So apparently this is not being mentioned in the mainstream media at all. But it's an amazing story. Basically, what happened was the Dutch government, as part of its transition to green technology and green business models and everything, passed a law regarding some kind of agricultural process that would banning that process that would have put 1/3 of Dutch farmers out of business. And the Dutch farmers just went, wow, they all just put down their tools, hopped on their tractors, and drove to the big cities in the Netherlands. And they basically brought the economy to a halt. And they're dumping truckloads of manure on the steps of government buildings and stuff. And they're not taking this lying down at all. And so the economy is basically paralyzed right now. And meanwhile, you've got agriculture in the EU a mess because they don't have enough natural gas coming from Russia to be able to create the fertilizer that they need to grow with their, and it's just it's a huge mess in Europe, which explains partially why the euro is tanking. But in a lot of other countries around the world, there are flat out food riots where governments are on the verge of being overthrown. Public buildings are being burned down. Lots of other damage is being done. And that's what you get, especially in the developing world, when you make life too expensive. And that's what's happened in the last 6 or so months, where food prices skyrocketed, gas prices skyrocketed. People can't live anymore. So they've taken to the streets. So we're going to see a wave of populist people either being elected or being put in office via a coup of some sort around the developing world. And that's going to be pretty chaotic because populists are better at being elected than they are at governing because they have an outlook without a necessary set of policies that attach to them. So I'm not saying a populist government can never work, but they tend to be very messy. So that's the world we're going to see here pretty soon. And a lot of these developing countries are also exporters of one kind or another, or of industrial or agricultural commodities. So the supply chains are going to get even messier if this continues. So the idea that the fact that we're slowing down, maybe tipping into a recession, and that slowing down inflation is going to make everything go back to normal is probably not the case. Things are going to get very messy just in different ways as this plays out.
Hey, in Netherlands, the police shot at a tractor during the night of farm protesters. I should point out that the rule we're talking about is a government proposal, EU proposal, because they're a bunch of unelected bureaucrats in Belgium that really have not a clue what's going on in the real world, but they wanted to cut pollutants like nitrogen oxide and ammonia by 50% by 2030. And, like, what are you supposed to do? You're a farmer. This is how you feed the crops. This is a case where it's exactly identical to the world's war on mining and on oil production and so-called fossil fuels. I don't like them because I don't know about you. When I'm pumping gas into my tank, I've never seen a fossil come out of that pump yet. But fossil fuels, be that as it may, and you do this when you have absolutely no means of substitution, no viable substitutes for gasoline, for petroleum-based products, for mining products. You have no viable means of substitution. They don't exist. And you really put the world in a crisis and then throw in a little war, either it was by provocation or imperialist intentions by Russia or a little bit of both. You throw that into the mix. And I try to explain to people are talking to me, well, the overturning of Roe v. Wade, hey, personally, I was against it, not for any ideological reasons. It'd just been the law of the land for 50 something years. And why just pour gasoline on the fire? All right. And then add to that, the Second Amendment case. I said, look, we're talking about the dissolution of Western civilization, arguably the self-immolation of Western civilization. So those things are not real high on my priority list now. Sorry to tell you. Boy, did I get a lot of blowback and anger over that. I'm more concerned about millions of people dying off, about people freezing through a potentially catastrophic winter in Europe and parts of Asia. That just kind of is higher up on the list to me, John.
There's this funny joke online about how Trump is having the best second term of any president that in living memory, because he's getting all the stuff without even being there. He's getting all the stuff that he was going for in his first term, and because this is basically what he promised. He promised his constituents a very conservative court, and he got it. And I think this is fascinating to watch the arguments, because they're fascinating arguments about how the Constitution is designed and how the Supreme Court is supposed to interpret the Constitution. Leaving the issues aside, the process is really interesting. And abortion will probably remain legal for the majority of Americans, no matter how the legislative thing plays out. But it is people voting now. Okay, so that's not, maybe you disagree with the details of it, but it's it's a thing that is being handled legislatively, which is how democracies are supposed to work. So that's not a natural disaster or a national disaster. And the gun thing is pretty hilarious when you think about it. They just basically eliminated the concealed carry laws in a bunch of states.
In
so
7 states, but New York,
but New York,
complete denial, and they've made you can get a carry permit, but you can't carry it any place. Basically, 98% of the state will be off limits. So that will be struck down, probably even by a federal court. I think this is like a case of desegregation where the court has to appoint a special master to the New York state legislature and say, this is the way it has to be done. Anything else is unconstitutional. Go for it.
Yeah. Well, and it's fascinating to watch this play out, because we have these mechanisms in place for the opinion of voters to work their way into laws. And lots of people, lots of reasonable people disagree about the end result that they'd like to see. So we're seeing this battle going on a lot of different fronts between people who sincerely care about how it plays out. And nobody, I think, is going to end up being happy with the result. And that's what you get in democracies. You get compromises that are just barely acceptable to enough people to keep them from hitting the streets, and that's the best we can hope for with any of this. Oh, and the Supreme Court in their trifecta this last week struck down a lot of the powers of the EPA. So and that wasn't just an environmental ruling. That was about what they call the administrative state, which conservatives believe has metastasized to the point where it's taking over the legislative duties of Congress and the Senate. And that we need to go back to actually passing laws that apply to a lot of the things that we're doing, instead of just handing vague regulations to big regulatory agencies, which then go out and in effect make the laws, but they're not elected, so it's interesting to see how all this plays out. And I don't really find myself voting or hoping that one side or the other dominates in these things. I'm just interested in how it plays out. But this is going to energize the bases of pretty much every political faction out there going into the midterm election, because everybody now has a dog in this fight. And I think that a lot more people are going to come out and vote in this midterm election than usually do. And we'll see if that skews it in either direction. Yeah, I don't know. I think both bases are going to be really motivated, and I think what we'll see is a lot of really interesting videos at polling places where you've got a bunch of pro-lifers and a bunch of pro-choice people right there, in each other's faces as the voters walk by. But
yeah. Well, the fact is, the way the country was originally conceived, the Constitution, if it matters to you, fine. If not, great. Was that these big matters of public policy are supposed to be handled politically, not judicially. Now, that means abortion, the states need to decide. And if you want a federal law about it, then you have to put the representatives in place to pass federal laws. When you have courts administering policy, creating policy from the bench, this is what you wind up with. Now you could say, well, isn't that true of the Second Amendment case with Bruin against New York State, and the fact, or New York State Pistol and Rifle Association versus Bruin? It's totally different because you're dealing with a defined constitutional right, and then it's up to the court to define its limitations, if any, or its improper restrictions. That is beyond the state's ability to actually regulate it, other than like free speech. They can regulate the time, place, and manner, which means you can't shut down I-95 because you're upset over something, but you can have a legal protest at the state capitol under certain conditions, not at 3 a.m. Blasting bullhorns. But we've lost sight of all this.
Yeah, and see, having it be a legislative issue rather than something the Supreme Court just decides, if it's not something that's specifically right there in the Constitution, when they infer things and then create laws based on that inference, we don't learn that much from it. But if we have to hash it out politically and then have legislatures vote on it and then live with the law that they vote on, we all have to educate ourselves on these issues. And I think it's good for us to learn more than we currently know about the big issues that dominate our lives. Because, if you go around and ask people on the street questions about the issues that we're talking about now, 90% of them have no idea. They have an emotional opinion about something, but they don't have the faintest idea about the philosophy and the details behind their opinion. And this is forcing us all to learn about these things. And I think, it's happening in a time of chaos. So it may or may not be something that adds fuel to the fire of political and economic chaos going forward. But in and of itself, having these big issues out there debated and then voted on legislatively is a good thing, because we end up being smarter at the end of the process than we were when it started.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the whole crux of it, political debate. Now, that hasn't always worked. In the case of slavery, we had to have a war over it to figure this out. But I don't think we need to have a war over these issues. I think they're resolvable in the context of legislative balancing of interests. Well, not to get into the whole legal thing because it really is quite boring. In any event, that is it for now. We will catch up with you in a couple of weeks. John, if you got a question for John in the meantime, email me, kl@kerrylutz.com. Go over to dollarcollapse.com and financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Sign up for free newsletters if you haven't already. And John, we'll talk to you in a couple of weeks.
Okay, see you, Kerry.